You don't notice grocery inflation in one dramatic moment. You notice it on a random Tuesday night when you grab the same cart you always grab, walk the same aisles you always walk, and somehow the total jumps from annoying to what just happened. One extra snack, one convenience meal, one pack of meat that felt normal until the register said otherwise, and now you're standing there doing silent math in your head, wondering which item in the bag cost you your margin for the week. That's how grocery inflation really hits. Not like a headline, like a leak. Slow, repetitive, and expensive. A few dollars here, a few dollars there. Then suddenly your monthly food budget is no longer a budget. It's a moving target. And the worst part is, most people respond the same way. They hunt for coupons. They switch one or two brands. They promise to be better next week. But here's the real problem. Inflation doesn't just raise prices. It punishes disorganization. It charges extra for indecision. It makes convenience feel normal, then makes normal unaffordable. So, if your grocery bill feels like it's getting away from you, this is not about becoming extreme. It's not about living on rice and beans forever. And it's definitely not about clipping coupons for 3 hours a week to save $6. This is about building a grocery system that still works when prices move, when your schedule gets messy, and when the store tries to sell you speed, comfort, and convenience at a premium. Because the people who stay calm during inflation are usually not the people with the most money. They're the people with the strongest systems. Now this matters because grocery prices are still rising even after the panic headlines fade. In the latest Consumer Price Index summary, food at home was up 2.7% over the year, while food away from home rose even faster at 3.5%. That means your groceries are still getting more expensive, and eating out is usually getting more expensive even faster. And the pressure is not evenly spread. USDA's latest food price outlook says food at home prices are expected to rise 3.2% this year, with categories like beef and veal, fish and seafood, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, processed fruits and vegetables, sugar and sweets, and non-alcoholic beverages expected to grow faster than their historical average. So if you feel like you're not imagining it when the produce section, the meat case, and your favorite drinks all seem to hurt more at checkout, you're not imagining it. Here's what history shows. In 2022, Americans spent 11.3% of disposable personal income on food, a level USDA said hadn't been seen since 1991. That wasn't because households suddenly got reckless. It was because food costs rose into a life category that became harder to absorb. And even before that, the long-term grocery inflation trend never really asked your permission. The Federal Reserve's Fred series, tracking food at home, shows a multi-decade climb in the grocery price index. Some years are calmer, some years hit harder, but the direction over time is obvious. Up. So no, this is not about waiting for prices to go back to normal. For most households, the smarter move is to accept that grocery prices are structurally higher than they used to be, then build a system that protects your cash flow anyway. That system starts with a mindset shift most people never make. The goal is not to buy the cheapest food. The goal is to buy the most stable nutrition for the lowest total cost after waste, impulse spending, and backup takeout are included. That one sentence changes everything. Because a cheap grocery cart that leads to spoilage, boredom, missed meals, and emergency delivery orders is not cheap. It's just delayed expensive. So let's build the inflation-proof grocery strategy from the bottom up. First, you need to stop shopping for meals and start shopping for modules. Most people get it wrong. They walk into the store trying to invent a week of perfect dinners on the fly, and that's exactly when inflation wins. Because when your brain is designing meals in real time, you buy too many unique ingredients, too many just-in-case items, and too many expensive convenience products that solve the stress of not having a plan. A smarter household shops in modules. Proteins, carbs, vegetables, flavor bases, fillers, snacks with limits, emergency meals. That's the structure. Instead of asking, "What do I want to cook this week?" ask, "How many combinations can I build from a small number of overlapping ingredients?" One whole chicken is not one dinner. It's roast chicken one night, wraps the next day, soup or fried rice after that. Beans are not a side dish. They are an extender for tacos, chili bowls, soups, and salads. Rice is not filler. It is budget shock absorption. Oats are not boring. They are one of the cheapest breakfast anchors you can own. CDC's budget guidance says to plan recipes around common ingredients and stretch meals like soups, casseroles, and large batch dishes so they last longer or freeze well. That advice sounds simple, but under inflation, simple is powerful. So, your first rule is this. Every item you buy should have at least 2 uses, preferably 3. If an ingredient only belongs to one very specific recipe, it has to justify itself. Otherwise, it's not a grocery item. It's a budget leak. Second, build a personal price book. This sounds obsessive until you realize stores are counting on you not knowing your own numbers. Most people know that prices feel higher. Very few know what they personally consider a good price for the 10 or 15 items that shape most of their food spending. That ignorance is expensive. You do not need a spreadsheet masterpiece. You need a notes app. Track the real buy price of your staples. Eggs, milk, bread, chicken, ground beef, rice, pasta, yogurt, cheese, coffee, bananas, frozen vegetables, peanut butter, cooking oil. Why? Because inflation doesn't just increase prices, it scrambles your sense of what's normal. If you don't anchor yourself, you start accepting bad deals because they're familiar. You see a package you always buy, the logo feels safe, and you throw it in the cart without noticing that the price per unit quietly moved again. The latest BLS average price data is a good reminder of how wide these differences can be. In April 2026, bananas averaged about 65 cents per pound, whole chicken about $2.03 per pound, eggs about $2.25 per dozen, milk about $4.14 per gallon, while ground chuck averaged nearly $6.92 per pound. Same protein economy? Not even close. That doesn't mean never buy beef. It means know when beef is a planned premium, and when chicken, eggs, beans, lentils, or pork stretch your dollars better. A price book gives you emotional distance from branding. You stop asking, "Do I usually buy this?" and start asking, "Is this a good buy today?" That question alone can save people more than most coupon apps. Third, split your grocery life into 2 shopping layers. This is one of the strongest inflation defenses you can build. Layer 1 is the monthly or bi-weekly baseload. These are your stable foods: rice, oats, pasta, canned tomatoes, dried beans, peanut butter, tortillas, frozen vegetables, frozen fruit, broth, yogurt, eggs when priced right, shelf-stable milk if needed, spices, oil, onions, potatoes, and a small set of proteins you know how to rotate. Layer 2 is the weekly fresh layer. This is where you buy fragile produce, dairy top-ups, markdown meat, sale-based add-ons, and anything time-sensitive. Why does this matter? Because people who do all their shopping in one emotionally loaded weekly trip tend to overreact to the store environment. They see high prices, panic, and then either overspend on convenience or underbuy and end up ordering food later. A layered system fixes that. Your base load protects you from being forced into bad prices. Your weekly layer lets you stay flexible. If beef is ugly this week, you don't panic. You already have rice, beans, pasta, frozen broccoli, canned tuna, oats, and soup ingredients at home. You're not at the mercy of whatever aisle is most inflated in that moment. That is what inflation-proof really means. Not immune to price increases, less exposed to them. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think stocking up means bulk buying everything. It doesn't. Bulk only works on items you will definitely use before quality drops, boredom sets in, or storage becomes chaos. Buying 20 yogurt cups on sale and throwing half away is not saving. Buying a larger bag of rice, oats, or frozen vegetables you reliably use is saving. Buying family packs of meat only works if you portion and freeze them the same day. If you don't, the freezer becomes a graveyard of someday food. USDA estimates that 30 to 40% of the U.S. food supply is wasted, and that waste has enormous cost implications. For a household, that means one of the fastest ways to beat inflation is simply to stop paying for food you never eat. Read that again, because this might be the most underrated grocery fact on the internet. A massive part of food inflation pain is not price alone. It's paying full price for optimistic versions of yourself. The salad kit you imagined, the berries you hoped you'd eat, the fancy sauce for the recipe you never made, the spinach for the healthy week that got destroyed by real life. Inflation punishes fantasy shopping. So fourth, you need a waste firewall. This is not sexy. It is extremely profitable. Pick 5 foods in your house that are most likely to die quietly in the fridge. For many homes, it's bagged greens, herbs, berries, leftover rice, deli meat, and random vegetables bought with good intentions. Those are now emergency priority foods. Create a 48-hour rule. Any fragile item opened or bought must be intentionally used within 48 hours. Not when we get around to it, intentionally used. Create a leftovers shelf at eye level. Not buried, not hidden behind drinks. Eye level. Create one use next basket in the fridge. If something is approaching the danger zone, it goes there. And create one weekly salvage meal. Fried rice, omelet night, soup night, taco bowls, pasta toss. These meals exist for one reason: to convert almost forgotten ingredients into edible savings. That is not being cheap. That is recovering cash. If you stop throwing away even one modest bag of groceries a week, you create savings without changing your income, without getting a raise, and without feeling deprived. Fifth, make store brands your default and name brands your exception. Most households still treat this backwards. They assume the name brand is standard and the store brand is the compromise. Under inflation, that logic is upside down. The CDC notes that buying store brands can save 20 to 30% on your food bill, especially on basics like canned tomatoes, milk, olive oil, and frozen fruits and vegetables. That range matters, because if even part of your cart shifts from branded autopilot to store brand default, the savings compound across every trip. And no, this doesn't mean pretending every generic product is identical. Some are worse. Some are basically the same. Some are better. But that's exactly why you test strategically. Pick 10 repeat purchases. Blind test if you have to. Pasta, canned beans, shredded cheese, oats, cereal, chips, yogurt, peanut butter, salsa, frozen vegetables. If the store brand passes, it becomes the permanent default. Not sometimes. Not if money is tight this week. Permanent. Inflation is a repetition problem, so savings must become repetitive too. A one-time coupon is nice. A permanent brand switch is structural. Sixth, control protein like a portfolio manager. This is where the big money sits. People often think they have a grocery problem, when what they really have is a protein allocation problem. Because the fastest way to blow up a food budget is to build every dinner around the most expensive protein you're used to eating. Think of protein in tiers. Tier 1 is your premium protein. Steak, higher-end beef cuts, specialty seafood, prepared meats. Tier 2 is your standard workhorse protein. Chicken thighs, whole chicken, ground turkey, some pork cuts, eggs when reasonably priced. Tier 3 is your budget stabilizer protein. Beans, lentils, chickpeas, peanut butter, canned tuna, tofu, cottage cheese, yogurt. An inflation-proof home never lets Tier 1 dominate the week. Tier 2 handles most dinners. Tier 3 supports lunches, breakfasts, and meat-stretching meals. That means instead of chili built from only beef, you build it with half beef and half beans. Instead of taco night centered on a mountain of meat, you bulk it with black beans, rice, sautéed onions, and shredded cabbage. Instead of insisting every dinner needs a large individual meat portion, you move toward bowls, stews, soups, curries, stir-fries, pasta dishes, and wraps, where protein is distributed rather than showcased. That's how families quietly cut their food bill without feeling like they're on a budget. And here's the psychological trick. Most people don't miss what isn't framed as a loss. If you put a smaller steak on the plate, it feels like cutback. If you build a rich rice bowl, taco bowl, curry, or loaded pasta with balanced ingredients, it feels like dinner. Same budget principle, totally different emotional experience. Seventh, stop paying retail for convenience you can pre-build at home. Now this matters because grocery stores have become incredibly good at selling time-saving products at astonishing margins. Pre-cut fruit, single-serve snacks, marinated proteins, ready rice, bagged salad kits, sauce packs, microwave bowls, individually wrapped everything. When life gets busy, those products feel harmless, but stacked over a month, they can quietly become the difference between a controlled grocery bill and a bloated one. Convenience is not the enemy. Unexamined convenience is. So instead of buying convenience every time, build your own version once. Portion snacks into containers. Cook rice in batches. Wash and portion fruit once. Marinate protein at home. Freeze soup in individual servings. Keep 2 emergency dinners that can be made in 10 minutes. Because the most expensive grocery decision is often not made in the store. It's made at 6:47 p.m., when you're tired, hungry, and tempted to solve the night with whatever requires the least thought. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think the grocery budget lives in the grocery store. No, the grocery budget lives in the gap between buying food and actually using it under stress. That gap is where takeout slips in. That gap is where "we have food but nothing to eat" shows up. That gap is where inflation collects interest. So your home needs a frictionless backup system. At least 2 breakfasts that require under 3 minutes. At least 2 lunches that require under 5. At least 3 dinners you can make half asleep. Oatmeal with fruit and peanut butter. Eggs and toast. Yogurt bowls. Bean quesadillas. Pasta with frozen vegetables and olive oil. Fried rice. Tuna wraps. Soup from the freezer. Boring? Maybe. Financially effective? Extremely. Because every low-cost emergency meal you normalize at home is one fewer high-cost emergency purchase outside it. 8th, treat sales like opportunities, not commands. A sale is only useful if it matches your system. This is the mistake that keeps middle-class households feeling like they're saving while spending more. They see a discount and interpret it as permission to buy, not as a price signal to compare. A real inflation-proof strategy asks 4 questions before anything on sale enters the cart. Do we already use it? Is the unit price actually better? Can we store it properly? Will buying it cause something else to be wasted? If the answer to any of those is no, the sale is just marketing wearing a yellow sticker. And here's a modern example that matters. USDA expects some categories, including eggs and dairy, to decline relative to 2025, while categories like beef, fresh vegetables, and non-alcoholic beverages are expected to grow faster than historical averages. That means a rigid shopper gets punished. A flexible shopper wins. If eggs ease, lean into eggs. If beef spikes, pivot to chicken, pork, beans, or mixed protein meals. If fresh vegetables are rough, use more frozen. If branded drinks get silly, cut frequency or switch. The store does not reward loyalty. It rewards adaptability. 9th, use the 70-20-10 cart rule. This is the rule that turns all of this into something you can actually remember. 70% of your cart should be core, repeat, multifunction foods. 20% can be flexible deal-based items. 10% can be joy. That last part is important. Joy. Because if your grocery strategy removes all pleasure, it will fail. People don't stick to plans that feel like punishment. They break them dramatically, then overspend in backlash. So yes, leave room for coffee you like, a dessert, a snack, a sauce, pizza night ingredients, something fun for the kids, or a comfort food that keeps the whole system human. But cap it. Structure protects the budget. Joy protects the structure. 10th, and this is the strongest insight in the entire strategy. Inflation-proof grocery shopping is mostly decision-proof grocery shopping. It is not about becoming the world's best bargain hunter. It is about reducing the number of expensive, tired, emotional, last-minute decisions your household has to make each week. That's the hidden engine. The more decisions you postpone until you're hungry, stressed, rushed, or seduced by packaging, the more you pay. The more decisions you make once, in advance, with a calm brain, the less inflation can exploit you. This is why some people with average incomes seem weirdly stable during high price periods. They're not smarter. They're not lucky. They simply repeat good decisions more often than bad ones. They eat similar breakfasts. They rotate familiar lunches. They know their cheap dinners. They recognize good prices. They waste less. They buy fewer fantasy ingredients. They don't turn every grocery trip into a new identity project. And if that sounds unglamorous, good. Financial stability usually is. Think about the 1970s inflation era, or the shock households felt coming out of the pandemic years. The winners were rarely the people who predicted every price move perfectly. The winners were the people who could flex, the people with pantry depth, the people who could turn staples into meals, the people who were not forced to buy everything at the worst possible moment. That principle still works now. And you can see the pressure clearly in modern spending data. Average household spending on food at home reached $6,224 in 2024, while food away from home averaged another $3,945. That's over $10,000 between groceries and food away from home for the average household. So when someone says, "It's only groceries," that's not a small category anymore. That's a major cash flow category. A strategy that cuts even a fraction of waste, impulse spending, and convenience premiums can change what your month feels like. Now let's talk about the 40% claim, because it has to be honest. Will every household cut exactly 40%? No. But here's where big reductions actually come from, not from one magic trick. They come from stacking layers. 5 to 10% from permanent store brand switches, 5 to 10% from reducing takeout triggered by poor planning, 5 to 15% from lowering protein cost per meal, 5 to 10% from waste reduction. Another slice from fewer convenience products, smarter sale behavior, and using frozen or canned foods when fresh is overpriced. CDC specifically recommends planning, shopping with a list, buying frozen or canned foods, using store brands, and buying some staples in bulk. None of those tips are dramatic alone. Together, they become a system. That is how households get real results. Not overnight, but fast enough to feel within a month. So, if you want the simplest version of this entire script, here it is. Build a small list of repeat meals. Track the good price of your staples. Default to store brands unless the difference truly matters. Keep a base pantry and freezer so you can pivot when prices spike. Use cheaper proteins more strategically. Turn leftovers into intentional meals. And never let a busy night force you into an expensive decision. That's the inflation-proof grocery strategy. Not panic, not deprivation, not coupon theater. A system. One that assumes prices will keep moving. One that protects you from waste. One that makes your budget less fragile. One that turns food from a weekly stress test into a controlled operating expense. And if you only remember one action rule, make it this. If a grocery item is not part of a repeat meal, a proven staple, or a planned joy purchase, it does not go in the cart. That single filter can save people hundreds without them even noticing where the money stopped leaking. Because in an inflationary world, the families who win are not the ones who react hardest. They're the ones who leak least. If this helped you rethink the way you shop, drop a comment with the one grocery category that keeps wrecking your budget. Meat, snacks, drinks, produce, convenience meals, whatever it is. And if you want more practical money systems that actually work in the real world, subscribe. Because the goal here is not just to survive expensive times. It's to build habits that make expensive times less powerful over you.